So let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that the people who charge the most for their time are usually the hardest people to access? So they don't work with everyone and they don't scale endlessly. And they definitely don't try to serve the masses. Instead, they choose depth over volume. And so today we're talking about why scarcity isn't a strategy, but it's essentially a philosophy. So Matt Williams is back with us. He's an executive coach and founder of Epiphany Professional Development, and he works with senior leaders at the very top of what they've built. But here's what's interesting is that Matt intentionally works with only a small number of clients at any given time. And he's here to talk a little bit about why that is. It's so good to see you again.
You as well, Lisa. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it feels like a day went by, but I think it's been like a week and a bit or something.
Yeah, I think
Time
we've
flies.
slept since then. Yep.
I hope so. Man, so I love this conversation because most coaches, everyone's trying to scale and grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you've intentionally done the opposite. So can you talk to us a little bit about why that is?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned last time, I've been doing this for 15 years, and prior to that, I had a couple of businesses that I built and ran. And over the last 13 plus years, I guess, I was a generalist coach, right? One who went in, followed the process, helped people developmentally at all levels. And I think they found value in that. We certainly seem to have positive results. But what has led me to this point is a generalist in the marketplace serves a very broad set of needs and is typically driven by HR. So whether they want to be there or not is somewhat irrelevant if they've been
Right.
given the direction to get coaching, right? So my most recent work has been from a specialist standpoint, right? If you're going to have a baby, you don't go to a family practice doctor, right? You go to an OB-GYN because you've got a very specific need. And so my practice has narrowed to those with very specific needs. And it turns out that they are at the top of whatever they've built, right? And we do that because depth requires it for us to go deeper. And scaling often turns into advice instead of transformation. So the transformation we're looking for, it doesn't happen in volume, it happens in depth.
Mhm. There's so much to say about that one-on-one time when you have with your mentor, right? Like
It
having a
can, yeah,
lot of time.
absolutely.
Yeah, I remember an instance in the early days of business, and I was looking for a mentor, and I was about to hire this coach, and he was charging a lot of money. And the first meeting was with his assistant, and I was thrown off by that because I'm like, I'm going to pay the big bucks for this man's program. Why am I talking to you? And I didn't mean it in a negative way, but it just felt like I wanted to learn from the person who was selling their program, and so I actually really like that. I think so many people are focused on growing and they think bigger is better. But what about the attention to detail that you're talking about?
Well, yeah, it is attention to detail, but it's also, as you mentioned, when there's a program, most anybody can deliver that in some fashion. And
Mm,
coaching is prescriptive, right? Much more so than a deep dive, and helping the individual gain insight and clarity around what they're doing. And so the people that I work with at this level don't need another program.
yeah.
Right? They need a thinking partner. They need a trusted confidant, not somebody from the board, not somebody from the legal team, not somebody that has an agenda. They need somebody that they can partner with confidentially, and work through some daunting challenges that they face.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I wish I had someone with me 24/7.
Well, give me a call after the show here. We'll work something out.
Everything's So you work with corporate executives and founders and CEOs, and at that level, leaders have access to a lot of advisors. Why do the best leaders actually seek fewer voices and not more?
That's an interesting question. The They do have access to a lot of advisors, and a lot of people want to be advisors to that level. But just as I indicated, at least the people that I work with don't necessarily need advice as much as they need a thinking partner. They need to develop clarity, prioritize, and build confidence in the decisions that they're making and how they're executing them. It really becomes much more of a trusted advisor role than it does somebody coming. They don't need business advice, right? These are extraordinarily smart people that have either started businesses or built businesses or responsible for large units of business. They don't need me for business advice, and they don't need others to tell them what or how to do it. They need to be able to tap into their inner selves and um, navigate the best way to do it rather than getting advice on how to do it.
Yeah. This is so not business related, but it reminds me of I was watching a show and it's about choosing your wedding dress, and people who brought multiple people with them to help them find a wedding dress in this show walked out with no dress because suddenly it was like everyone had an opinion. That one individual was being clouded with so much judgment that they became overwhelmed and they didn't do anything. But the people, the women who brought in one person with them, they could talk to that person and they ended up buying a wedding dress. And I feel like that's relatable because when there's so many people telling one person stuff, then it becomes like, what do I do? You get cloudy, your judgment fades, and then you start questioning yourself.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's spot on.
So with wedding dresses instead of business, but it's the same thing.
In many regards, yeah.
So let's talk about scarcity itself. Why does working with fewer leaders actually make the work better?
Well, as you said, the coaches that are building scalable volume-based practices are those that are managing, trying to balance a lot of plates, right?
Mhm.
They've got a script that goes with their process. They've got a process that has to be met with every individual. They're typically responsible to the corporate stakeholders in order to report out and to follow those processes. And so anybody with a plate of responsibility is only going to be able to address that at a certain level or a certain depth, right?
Right.
So in my work, I may have two or three clients at any given point in time. I only shoot for 4 to 6 clients in any given year. And it's because of the depth of the engagement. These are not behavioral issues. These are not issues where they need to delegate better or they need to, assimilate a new competency or a skill. These are typically identity-based issues, which requires that we drill into those a bit. We have a lot of conversations. We spend some very difficult time together unpacking what that means for them and helping them sort through and navigate how to reframe it for themselves so that they show up better and perform at a different level, given what the organization needs and what they need in order to serve the organization.
Right. Because they're not, I mean, they're human too. So it's like they're changing and developing and becoming all at the same time.
Yeah, and that yeah, absolutely, and that gets lost a little bit. Anytime somebody ascends, changes responsibility, moves to a higher level within an organization, there's some level of identity crisis that happens. If you're a technical expert, you view yourself as a technical expert and you solve technical expert problems. If you carry that into a leadership role, it's going to be very difficult to get out of the weeds and see yourself differently in that new leadership role so you can lead at an enterprise level rather that at a technical level.
Yeah. I was speaking to someone yesterday actually who said that she became a CEO and couldn't even say that out loud because of imposter syndrome and
Mm,
her identity, the way she viewed herself as like what she was before, and she couldn't quite comprehend that she was now in this higher level position. So her identity, she couldn't move past that. So she needed someone to help get her through that.
Yeah, our beliefs in many regards drive our behaviors, right? And
Hmm.
if you don't believe, if you suffer from the imposter syndrome, which a large number of us do and senior leaders do, then it's really difficult to show up in the way the organization and your team needs.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about what is happening in a leader's world when they reach out to you.
Okay, you mean what triggers that response, if you will?
So what happens when they reach out to you?
Well, typically there's one of two things going on. There's what we just spoke about a little bit. There's a transition that has happened, right? They're being promoted into a bigger seat. There's greater responsibility, things of that nature. The other thing that I see is there's a level of frustration, and this is the frustration is really hard for them to verbalize because they don't understand where it's coming from. All they know is that decisions keep landing back on their desk. They feel like their team isn't stepping up, and these patterns repeat themselves. I've got one of my CEO clients is really kind of the ideal client profile for me. His call to me 10 years ago, as it is now, was when I got up this morning, my first thought was everybody's out of their mind. They don't know what they're doing. My
Wow.
organization's falling apart because everybody around me is an idiot.
Wow.
Which led him to, which I thought showed a great deal of humility, which his next thought then was, it must be me.
Okay.
It can't be everybody. It must be me. So that's the other one is the frustration that things aren't right and not being able to really verbalize or put a finger on what it is that's creating the frustration.
That takes a lot of courage to say out loud, for sure. And I think we've all thought that, especially if we're leading a team and it's not going as we need it to go. That could be a really frustrating place to be.
Absolutely. You can pull all the levers. You can do all of the things that you've been taught to do and that you have experience doing and that you've done before. And then if it still doesn't work, it's where do you go?
Yeah, it's the growth factor that happens there.
Yeah, because the expectation, organizational expectations change whether your identity does or not, right?
Hmm.
There's some statistic that indicates that 70% of promoted executives or newly promoted executives fail. Um, and it's that transition from where they were to where they are and the expectations that surround them. And very few of them have the ability to, work with somebody to navigate that process. And the CEOs that might be listening into to this, if you're a founder, if it's your business, it's one thing. If you're in the corporate world, right, the turnover rate is pretty high.
Yeah.
And it's because that identity doesn't follow the expectations or doesn't adjust quickly enough to meet the expectations.
Yeah. And I think everyone can relate to feeling like they want to get to the next level because they get a quote unquote bored with the way things are going and they want a challenge. But then when it comes to getting promoted, that challenge becomes like a mountain to climb because it's like you have to relearn, you have to learn new skills, and there's that growth period, and that's very real for a lot of people. I find myself not loving coasting. Like I always want to strive for the next thing, but then when it comes to the next thing, I'm like, why didn't I just bask in that beautiful coasting for a little while longer? Because now there's so much more to do, right? That's the
Yeah,
reality of
well,
it.
it's always greener. We all have ambitions, and we all believe that the next level is the answer, right? But it always comes with its challenges.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit more about identity. So most leadership programs often focus on the behavior and skills, and we already mentioned this. You talk about identity. So why do you think that identity is so important and crucial in all of this work?
Um, Well, again, with those that I'm working with, it's not so much about skills. They typically have the skills. They have the competencies. It is the behaviors that result from the identity work. You mentioned imposter syndrome, right? Um, Skills just simply don't solve the identity misalignment. Um,
Mhm.
you can go to any and all kinds of training, but if you don't have the mindset and the confidence and the identity to support the application of those behaviors and skill sets, then it's of little value.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that confidence comes after action or before? I'm just curious.
Well, I think it can happen either way,
Hmm.
depending upon where you are in your career and where you are in the organization.
Hmm.
I do believe that those that are successful at the highest level have a very strong self-perception,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
They know who they are, and again part of the work that at times needs to be done as somebody transitions into that upper level, because you can exist and perform sometimes at a very high level with just technical competencies and skills, right?
right,
But at the higher levels in the organizations, um, the decisions are more difficult. They're less clear. You have less information. The expectations are higher. It just goes on and on. And if you're not confident in who you are and your value system and your vision, and where you're going to take the organization, then you can be derailed pretty quickly.
totally. If you're not clear on that and you have to make a big decision and you don't have that charted out or clear in your mind, you really can't make a decision confidently, right? Especially if you don't know your values and why you're doing what you're doing. So it's so important.
Yep.
Yeah. So when leaders do this work with you, what actually changes? So what does a team notice? Like, give us a year projection.
Um, so when I've worked with the leaders that have gone through this, that where we've worked together, it has been organizational efficiencies begin to improve. Ownership and accountability within the teams begins to improve. Um, the frustrations that the leader has experienced begins to dissipate. And rather than this cycle of a lack of progression towards the organizations, the enterprise's goals and objectives, they actually begin to make steps towards that. Now, there's a whole lot of other factors, right, involved. There's always the market dynamics and the competition and product generation, everything that's going on on the business side with the leader. But if they have greater clarity, if the decision processes are cleaner, if the patterns become more visible, then the outcomes improve. And so it's a difficult adjustment for the leader, but it's also a difficult adjustment for the teams that they're responsible for, right? Because their change is going to signal a change to the organization, and the organization has to adjust as well. And that requires the leader to commit to, right? The
Yeah.
direction that they're going to go and to stand firm without maybe a lot of evidence that where they're headed is going to bear fruit, right?
Yeah.
But once again, if you if your identity is such that, and your belief in yourself and your vision is such that you're willing to commit to it, die on the hill, right? Then the organizational changes will come about, and you will see the success that you've envisioned.
Yeah. I mean, that's tough. As soon as I mean, in a personal life, I remember going through major changes and the people around me were like not having it. They're like, we want the old Lisa back, right? But there's like, no, there's no turning back now. Like this is how it's going. That can feel like pressure, like a pressure cooker, like one of those old school tea kettles that's like boiling over. That's what it feels like. It's like, you want to keep going, and that's tough.
Yeah,
Um,
because the people that engage me have built these organizations, right? And they're used to Bob.
yeah,
When Bob shows up every day and the way Bob behaves and acts, and when that changes, then they have to make a choice. They have to
yeah.
determine, are they going to embrace that and change with them, and accept more ownership and accountability, or are they going to look elsewhere? And sometimes that's necessary as well.
Yeah, for sure. So it's been so much fun talking to you today. Who should be paying attention to this conversation?
Who should be paying attention?
Yeah,
Any leader who's frustrated or gone through a transition, anybody carrying too much responsibility. Founders often become the bottleneck, and have difficulty seeing that and or even letting go of that. Right. Some will see it, but just struggle with letting go of it because it's their brand, their name, their reputation on the line. Um, so it's those CEOs, senior leaders, founders, um, those who don't know whether it's them or the team.
right, right. And how can someone get in touch with you? Tell us more about the work that you're doing.
Uh, so my website is a great avenue. I post regularly on LinkedIn around this topic. That's a great avenue as well, and there are other outlets that sponsor or that publish some of my materials. So epiphanyprofessional.com, Matt Williams, PCC, executive coach in Houston. There's a variety of ways to find me, and I would assume that attached to this podcast will also be some contact information.
Absolutely, there will be. Do you have any advice for any leaders listening out there who might be feeling like they're alone or they just are struggling? Do you have any advice for them of what they should start thinking about or what they should be doing first?
Yeah, my advice in the past, Lisa, was to solicit some feedback. And while that can be important to a leader, obviously, and we should all solicit feedback. I don't know how much value there is in that for someone in this situation, right? Because the feedback that they'll get is more often what they want to hear, not what they need to hear.
Right.
Everybody has a protective kind of mode or mindset, right? So they're not going to cut their own throats. Um, and regardless of how nice, how caring, how giving a leader is, and how open they are, that phenomena is still going to play out, right? So
Mhm.
um, I think the leader should probably simply reflect, journal, sit back, think about where they've come, what's changing, what they're struggling with, what could be better if, just those kind of things, where they want to go and what they've done to try to drive to that end, and where's the gap, right? It may be a simple gap analysis. This is where we want to be. This is where we are. Why can't I bridge that gap? What's standing in our way? And if it's something that mechanical, technical, that they can structural, that they can fix internally, great. If they've tried those avenues and it hasn't worked, then give me a call.
Amazing. It's like I said, it's been so much fun talking to you. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lisa. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you to our audience. So, scarcity isn't always about exclusivity. Sometimes it's about protecting the depth of the work. And so, the leaders who change organizations are usually the ones who are willing to change themselves first. And so, we will have Matt's information and resources in the show notes. So, you can access all of his resources and him to learn more information. At the top of leadership, the question isn't who is what you should do next, it's who you need to become. So we always need to be focused on who we are, who we should be becoming, not who we think we are. That's a skill that's hard to learn. Reach out to Matt. Until next time, take care, everyone.